Hello, and welcome to another Book Thoughts. I just finished reading the first of the Hussite trilogy, A Tower of Fools, by Andrzej Sapkowski, who was the writer of the Witcher series. Before we get started, what kind of book is it? It is a historical fantasy. It is very clearly written to be part of the trilogy. I have the next two books, but I'm reading some other things before I go back there. It's small scale. It's following a couple individuals who are going on adventures. Right. Well, kind of. Let's wind it back to that very beginning. Historical fantasy. Now, if you know your medieval, late medieval, early modern European Central European history, then the name Hussite will mean something to you. The Hussites were a group of heretics, from the point of view of the Catholic Church at least, in Czechoslovakia, or I guess it would be the Czech Republic now, Bohemia, I believe, specifically. That sounds probably like some real nitty-gritty historical for your historical fantasy, and you would be correct. This book does not hold your hand. It gives you a quick rundown of some things, but it does not hold your hand. You need at least passing familiarity with Central European history and late medieval history in order to really get something out of this. You need to understand the Holy Roman Empire, how the Catholic Church worked as a political force, and the building tensions that led to the Reformation. Without those things, you're going to be lost. And the book makes no apologies for that. But if you do have those things, then you'll start reading and you'll be like me, who for the first 200 pages or so was like, this is fun to read, but where's the fantasy? It does come in, but it's very much a real setting where there's a little bit of magic in the background. Kind of like an urban fantasy, you would expect the real world to basically be the same, with just a little bit of magic in that background. That's what we have here. It keeps pretty ambiguous at first until it really builds up your expectation of, or your anticipation of some more magic things, and we get more immersed in it that way. Now, the other thing you should know about this book is if you've read the Witcher series, you know three things about Sapkowski. Sapkowski loves playing with weird narrative structures. Sapkowski loves subverting tropes, classic fantasy and fairy tale tropes. And he likes writing, or I don't know if I assume he likes writing these, but he writes very engaging characters. I have to say some of just my favorite characters, the back and forths between characters, Sapkowski's amazing at. So this book has all three of those, without a shadow of a doubt. So let's take those in order. First, we have those, what's the narrative playing he does? In this case, it's not one of his grandest experiments, but I really enjoyed it. Each chapter starts off with a heading and just a couple bullet points or thing, and they start off with in which we meet our main character, so on and so on, in which character A meets character B and talks about topic Y. Now, whenever I first saw those, I was a little bit like, what's this? It's just a little odd to tell me what's going to happen in a chapter before it happens. But don't skip those, because they get hilarious. They get really funny. They get fourth wall leaning. You'll get commentary on the actions of the characters. One particular favorite of mine actually referenced that this is a book and that this justifies the title of the book, and it recalls older styles of narrative, a little bit of a troubadour's tale. And that actually ties to the next thing, the subverted fairy tale tropes. We start off with our main character and the woman he loves dearly being separated by bad knights. And the man has to run for his life, and the woman gets locked away in a tower. Such is how we're presented everything at first. This makes us have a classic, it actually gets referenced in the book itself, but a classic, Lancelot goes to save his lady tale. And that's exactly what the main character views himself as. The main character is competent in his fields and nothing else. His fields are medicine and magic, and everything else involves dealing with literally any other character. He makes poor choices and has poor judgment consistently and turns the book from what would in another storyteller's hands be an adventure, an epic, whatever, into essentially a shaggy dog tale where the character and his compatriots end up going in circles constantly because the main character got a harebrained scheme, did something reactionary, and screwed them all over, and now they have to run this way or they got dragged that way. Constantly, never ending, and it actually ends up being really funny. That this book is based on a lot of jokes that are the style that the first time you groan, the second time you're bored of it, but by like the fifth or sixth time, it's the funniest thing. I don't want to spoil them for you, but there are multiple running gags of that nature. Really quick things. Quick, like 2-line gags that show up repeatedly. And so keep your eyes out for those, open for those, if you read this book. And then we have Sapkowski's characters. So the first 100 pages of the book were a little, I want to say frantic. We are given so many characters and secondary characters, tertiary characters, historical cameos, that it can actually be a little difficult to know who I need to pay attention to. But eventually, after about 100 pages, out of about 600 pages, you get a sense of, okay, here's our core cast. We have our main character, who is naive and love blind and a bit of a moron, but intelligent. Then we have his first compatriot, who is a priest of sorts, who is incredibly cynical, glorified con man, and very world-wise. And then we have the third companion, who is, a intelligent giant, not an actual giant, but, just very large person, very strong, with softer notions, kind of a gentle giant, unless you trigger, unless you go past the threshold. And then he is very capable of doing extreme violence, and he is deceptively intelligent. So all three of our main characters, but he's not world-wise. He's very wise to some things, but he isn't world-wise in the same way as the priest character. So we have three characters who are all very intelligent, but also limited in some ways. The main character, who is book smart, but in every other way an idiot. The priest, who is incredibly world-wise, but cynical in a fantasy book. Doesn't believe in things in a fantasy book. And a very, I want to say wise, he's full of wisdom, giant, who knows a lot of things, but not enough things. Big blind gaps. So we have a very different kind of adventuring party. They have two stated goals that hold in tension for most of the book. What the goals are slightly drifts. The main character, who is, lovelorn, all that, gets, drags the whole group into all these different adventures, misadventures, really. He's constantly changing direction as to what he's trying to do. His two companions are steadfast. They're trying to get him to Hungary, to get him away from the people trying to kill him. That's all they're trying to do. But because of the misadventures, then they'll have to do something or another to drag him, to drag his butt out of the fire, basically. And that basic narrative loop repeats for the whole book. The plot, on top of it, changes wildly. It swings between, lovelorn, a young man who has high notions of his own ability, to, trying to go after the one he loves, to misadventures with robber knights, to magical misadventures. It just keeps cycling around and around. And not only does everything cycle around and around in this kind of Shaggy Dog story manner, it also does a really good job of pulling in things that happened before, making them relevant again. Then you forget about them for a while, and then they'll be relevant again, and just looping that way too. So it's all very well crafted. It's a book, how do I say, with a lot of plot but not narrative, or vice versa. I'm not exactly sure what my words should be in this case and what order, but it is engaging once you get past those first 100 pages. And the characters in them are lively, they're unique, they're interesting, and their interactions, the dialogue is fantastic. It can be sassy, it can be witty, it can be just puns. It is consistently engaging when two people talk to each other in these books. Even if it's just people who are there very shortly. It's peasants who don't know, who are trying to explain why heretics were being burned, but it was like that something had been telephoned to them 4 degrees down. Anytime someone talks, it's a good time. The one last thing that I will hit upon here is one thing that I think was weak in this book. Like I said before, the first 100 pages, I was a bit confused who I needed to be paying attention to. I was being hit with a lot of names that ended up being not very relevant, and a lot of characters that I thought were going to be bigger parts of things because I didn't know they were historical characters and then went off to the side. And so you're just constantly barraged with that. It was hard to keep a balance of those things. At the end of the book, the last, I say, 30 pages were unfortunate because we got to the climax and denouement, and then we had to set up the next book. But that involved introducing new characters, setting a new cadence. I think it would have been nice if we could have cut those 30 pages and just fallen into them in the next book. I'm not sure how necessary they are for the transition. I think we could have just... I mean, I haven't read the next book. Maybe they are necessary, but I don't think that they should have necessarily been in the book that I just finished. Because it kind of ended weird. But it was only 30 pages out of 630 pages, something like that. So it wasn't very much. It was just one little end of a read session that was like, the end of the actual narrative of the book was very satisfying. I enjoyed it very much. So, overall, I'm going to say that this is a hearty recommendation. I enjoyed it very much. I look forward to reading the next book in the series, Trilogy, and I'm really glad it was translated to English. Let me know what you guys think about Sapkowski and the Hussite Trilogy if you've read it. Give me a like if you enjoy hearing my thoughts about books, and give the channel a subscribe if you want to see more stuff. I do random stuff. You can see my channel. It's all over the place. Anyway, That'll be it for now, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.